I got fired on a Thursday morning, standing ankle-deep in wet grass with a shovel in my hand. And 3 weeks later, water was pouring through the finished basement of the same people who told me I was no longer the right fit for the image of the neighborhood. Funny thing is, if they'd just called me lazy or expensive, I probably would have shrugged it off and moved on. But no, they had to make it personal, had to say it with that tight little country club smile people use when they think they're being classy while twisting the knife. And the worst part was, for a minute there, I actually believed them. My name's Caleb Mercer, and for almost 12 years, I took care of a property out in Belmeadow Ridge, this gated subdivision about 40 minutes outside Nashville, where every mailbox looks custom-made and every couple acts like they're one charity gala away from being royalty. Big houses, fake Southern accents, golf carts with leather seats, that kind of place. I wasn't born into money, not even close. My dad laid pipe for the county utilities department until his knees gave out. And growing up, if something broke, you fixed it yourself because there wasn't anybody coming to save you. That's how I learned drainage work. Most landscapers mow lawns and trim hedges. My dad taught me to pay attention to the stuff nobody sees: grading, runoff, groundwater pressure, the way water moves after a storm. He used to say, "A house doesn't fall apart from fire first, son. It rots from water." Took me years to realize how right he was. The Whitakers hired me back in 2012, right after they bought this massive stone house overlooking a little creek basin behind the subdivision. Beautiful property, terrible location. Whole backyard sat lower than the neighboring lots, which meant every heavy rain pushed water downhill straight toward their foundation. First time I walked the property, I remember telling Grant Whitaker, "You've got a flooding problem waiting to happen." He laughed and said, "Well, that sounds expensive." I said, "Not yet." Back then, Grant was actually all right. Typical finance guy, always on his phone, but decent enough. His wife Vanessa, though, different story. Vanessa cared about appearances the way some people care about oxygen. She'd complain if the hydrangeas leaned too far left. One time she made me re-edge a flower bed because it looked emotionally uneven. I swear to God those were her exact words. Still, I kept my head down and did the work. Over the years, I built a full French drain system beneath that property. Gravel trenches, perforated pipe, runoff channels tied into an overflow basin near the tree line. Most of it invisible unless you knew where to look. During storms, I'd come out at midnight sometimes just to make sure debris wasn't clogging the runoff gates. Nobody asked me to do that. I just knew what would happen if I didn't. And for 11 straight years, that basement stayed dry. I even kept records. Every rainfall, every maintenance check, every adjustment to the slope grading. Not because anybody told me to, but because my father drilled it into me that if your name's attached to something, you protect yourself with paperwork. Turns out that old man saved my ass one more time without even being alive to see it. The trouble really started after the Carmichaels moved in across the street. New money, loud money, the kind that installs outdoor fireplaces nobody uses and throws parties just so neighbors can hear the laughter through the windows. They hired this flashy landscaping company from Franklin, all matching polos and drone footage and social media branding. Suddenly, every yard in Belmeadow Ridge started looking like a hotel resort brochure. One afternoon, I was replacing a drainage grate near the Whitakers' side yard when Vanessa walked outside, holding a glass of wine, staring across the street at the Carmichaels' place. She goes, "Don't you think our property feels a little dated?" I looked around confused because their lawn looked perfectly fine to me. I said, "Grass is healthy. Retaining walls holding. Drainage held through that last storm pretty good." She sighed like I'd completely missed the point. "No, Caleb. I mean aesthetically. That word right there, aesthetically." I started hearing it a lot after that. A month later, she had me remove half the native shrubs because they looked too rustic. Then she complained the backyard smelled damp after rainstorms. I almost laughed because, yeah, Vanessa, that's what happens when your house is built over a natural water shelf. But I didn't say it. You learn pretty quick in those neighborhoods that wealthy people don't pay you for honesty. They pay you to confirm their taste. Then came the Thursday morning, everything changed. I'd just finished clearing sediment from the north trench line when Vanessa walked across the yard in white tennis shoes that probably cost more than my truck payment. She had an envelope in one hand, and that expression people wear when they've already rehearsed the conversation in the mirror. "Caleb," she said softly, "we've decided to move in a different direction with the property." I remember blinking at her like maybe I'd misheard. A different direction? She nodded. We're looking for a more modern outdoor vision. Modern outdoor vision. 11 years. And somehow I got replaced by a slogan. She handed me the envelope, and before I could even open it, I heard leaf blowers roaring out front. Two young guys unloading equipment from a shiny black trailer with the logo Greenscape Elite wrapped across the side like they were sponsored NASCAR drivers. And standing there in the drizzle, holding that envelope, I had this weird sinking feeling in my stomach. Not because I lost the account, but because I realized they truly had no idea what I'd actually been doing all these years. I didn't argue with her. That's the part people always expect when I tell this story, like I should have thrown the envelope back at her or said something dramatic before peeling out of the driveway. Truth is, I was tired. Tired in a way that sneaks up on you after years of swallowing comments and smiling through disrespect because you need the paycheck. So I just nodded, walked back toward my truck, and started loading my tools while those Greenscape Elite kids buzzed around the front yard like they were filming a commercial. One of them actually gave me a little grin and said, "Hey man, appreciate you keeping it warm for us." Keeping it warm. I almost laughed. Instead I said, "You boys know where the overflow cleanouts are?" Blank stare. The taller one shrugged. Irrigation guy handles most of that." And right there, I knew exactly how this was going to end. See, landscaping companies like that focus on what people can photograph. Symmetrical hedges, lighting packages, decorative stone, outdoor kitchens. But drainage work? Nobody brags about drainage at a cocktail party. Nobody posts French drain maintenance on Instagram. The whole job only matters when it stops working, and by then it's already expensive. I drove home that afternoon with this knot sitting in my chest. Not anger exactly. More like disappointment. My father used to say the hardest part about skilled labor isn't the work. It's knowing most people won't understand the difference between someone experienced and someone who just looks professional. That night, I sat at my kitchen table flipping through old maintenance logs while rain tapped against the windows. Every inspection date, every trench flush, every overflow adjustment. 11 years of records sitting in a milk crate beside my chair. My wife Emily walked in around midnight and found me staring at one of the old property maps. She goes, "You okay?" I remember rubbing my eyes and saying, "You ever spend so long protecting something that you forget it doesn't belong to you?" Emily sat down beside me quietly. She knew what that property meant to me. Not emotionally exactly, but professionally. The Whitaker place was the hardest drainage problem I'd ever solved. Half that backyard wanted to become a swamp every winter, and somehow I'd kept it stable for over a decade. Then she noticed the survey map in my hand. "Wait," she said, leaning closer. "Why does that line cut through your old parcel?" That's when things got interesting. See, years before Belmeadow Ridge became a luxury subdivision, I'd inherited 2 rough acres behind the creek basin from my father. I sold most of it off during development, but I held on to one narrow wooded strip near the runoff channel because honestly, nobody wanted it. Too muddy, too unstable for building permits. At least that's what everyone thought. The next morning, I drove down to the county records office mostly out of curiosity. I asked the clerk if they could pull the original drainage permits tied to Lot 14, the Whitaker property. Older lady named Denise helped me out. Sweet woman, been there forever. She disappeared into the back room for about 20 minutes, then came back carrying a thick folder. "You did this installation?" she asked. "Most of it." She flipped through a few pages. "Well, looks like you filed part of the runoff easement under your adjacent parcel ownership." I frowned. "What?" She slid the survey toward me and tapped the corner with her pen. And there it was. Years earlier, when I'd built the overflow junction to redirect excess groundwater toward the creek runoff path, the county required an easement agreement because a section of the drainage route crossed into the wooded strip I still owned. Since I personally designed and installed the system before final subdivision approval, the maintenance rights stayed attached to my parcel unless formally transferred, which they never were. I remember sitting there staring at that paperwork while this strange feeling crept over me. Not revenge, not yet anyway. More like realization. The Whitakers didn't actually own the drainage output system protecting their basement. They just benefited from it. Now, before anybody jumps to conclusions, let me make something very clear. I never sabotaged anything. Never damaged property. Never blocked a pipe or tampered with runoff flow. That would have been illegal and honestly beneath me. I simply stopped maintaining infrastructure connected to land I legally owned. That's it. And maintenance mattered more than people realized. Over the years, tree roots constantly pushed against the trench lines. Sediment built up after storms. Debris clogged the collection basins every few months. Without regular clearing, the whole system gradually slowed down until water started backing into the low zones around the foundation, which is exactly what started happening. At first, it was small things. A week after they fired me, we got a decent rainstorm and I noticed standing water near the Whitaker's rear retaining wall while driving past. Not flooding yet, just pooling. The kind most homeowners ignore because they assume it'll drain eventually. Except I knew that yard better than anybody. I knew where the pressure points were. A few days later, my buddy Nate called me. Nate handled pest control for half the subdivision and knew everybody's business before sunset. He goes, "You hear about the Whitakers?" I said, "Nope." "They're pissed. Apparently, the new landscaping crew tore up part of the back, grading, installing accent lighting." I closed my eyes right there at the kitchen counter. "Tell me they didn't touch the slope near the west trench." Pause. "That bad, huh?" I let out this slow breath because, yeah, it was that bad. The original grade angle diverted groundwater away from the foundation at a very specific pitch. If those idiots flattened it for decorative stonework, they basically rerouted runoff straight back toward the basement wall. Nate chuckled nervously. "Vanessa told Melissa at yoga your system was outdated anyway." That one stung more than it should have. Not because of my ego, but because people like Vanessa always assume invisible work is simple. If they can't see it, they think anybody could have done it. October rolled in wet that year. Real wet. 3 storms in 10 days. Every drainage contractor in the county was busy. Then came the Saturday night storm. I still remember sitting on my back porch around 1 a.m. listening to thunder roll across the hills while rain hammered the metal roof hard enough to shake the gutters. And somewhere in the middle of that storm, my phone buzzed. Grant Whitaker. I stared at the screen for a long second before answering. His voice sounded different. Smaller somehow. "Caleb, hey. We've got water coming into the basement." I looked out into the rain and said carefully, "How much water?" "Couple inches already. Maybe more. The sump can't keep up." I closed my eyes because I could already picture exactly what was happening. Saturated soil pressure pushing groundwater against the north foundation wall. Overflow trench backed up. Runoff with nowhere left to go. Grant kept talking fast, panic rising in his voice. "We called Greenscape, but they're not answering. Vanessa says maybe one of the drains collapsed or something. Can you come take a look?" And I'll be honest, part of me wanted to grab my boots immediately. Reflex, I guess. After 11 years, protecting that property had become automatic. But then I remembered standing in the rain holding that envelope while Vanessa talked about modern outdoor vision. So instead I asked one question. "Grant, did they transfer the easement maintenance agreement after terminating my contract?" Silence. Long silence. Then quietly he said, "I don't know what that means." And that's when I realized the Whitakers had fired the only person who fully understood the system holding their property together. For a few seconds, all I could hear on the phone was rain hammering against Grant's side of the line and this faint echo of water sloshing somewhere in the background. Then Vanessa's voice cut through, sharp and frantic. "Ask him if he can stop it." Grant lowered the phone for a second, probably covering the microphone, but I still heard them arguing. "You said the new company checked everything." Well, how was I supposed to know there were underground permits involved? Underground permits. Funny phrase when your basement's filling like a bathtub. Grant came back on the line, sounding exhausted. "Caleb, please. We've got furniture floating down here." Now, people always ask me if that was the moment I felt satisfied. Truth is, not really. Mostly I felt tired. There's a strange emptiness that comes from watching somebody finally understand your value only after they're desperate enough to say your name like a prayer. I told him, "I'm not under contract anymore, Grant." Another silence. Then he said quietly, "So that's it." I leaned back in my porch chair listening to the storm and thought about all those nights I'd spent protecting that house while they slept upstairs completely unaware. The midnight trench cleanings. The emergency runoff reroutes. The weekends I skipped with Emily because another storm system was rolling through Middle Tennessee. Finally, I said, "No, that's not it. But I need you to understand something before we go any further. Your landscaping company handles appearances. I handled structural water control. Those aren't the same thing." Vanessa grabbed the phone then. Her voice had completely changed. Gone was the polished country club tone. Now she just sounded scared. Caleb, if this is about the firing, we can discuss that later. Right now we need help. And there it was. Need. Not aesthetics. Not branding. Not modern vision. Need. I told her the truth. Even if I came out tonight, I can't legally service portions of the system without reinstating access authorization through the easement agreement. If the county finds out I'm performing work after contract termination without updated liability coverage, both of us are exposed. She snapped, "This is unbelievable." I almost laughed at that. Unbelievable. Like 11 years of invisible labor had just magically happened on its own. Grant got back on the phone and asked if we could at least talk in the morning. I told him sure. Then I hung up. Emily walked onto the porch a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She sat beside me, quietly watching lightning flicker over the tree line. "You okay?" she asked again. I nodded slowly. "I think so. But honestly, I wasn't sure. Because deep down, there's this ugly little part of human nature that wants vindication. Wants people to hurt after they've diminished you." And sitting there listening to rain pound across Bellmeadow Ridge, I hated how good it felt knowing I'd been right all along. By sunrise, half the subdivision already knew. That's how neighborhoods like Bellmeadow work. Information spreads faster than weather. By 9 a.m., photos of soaked basement carpet and stacked dehumidifiers were bouncing around neighborhood Facebook groups like crime scene evidence. Then came the city inspection. Apparently, the Whitakers contacted the HOA emergency board, who contacted county code enforcement after Greenscape Elite tried blaming unexpected groundwater migration, which is corporate language for "we have absolutely no idea what we're doing." Around noon, County Inspector Ray DeLucci called me directly. Now Ray and I go way back. Good guy. Straight shooter. First thing he says is, "Caleb, what the hell happened up there?" I told him exactly what happened. No embellishment. No revenge speech. Just facts. New landscaping modifications disrupted grade flow. Maintenance access on the overflow route ceased after contract termination. Easement ownership remained attached to my adjacent parcel. Ray sighed real hard. "Please tell me they didn't alter the west drainage pitch." "Oh, they altered it." Long pause. Jesus Christ. That afternoon, Ray inspected the property himself. According to Nate, who of course somehow witnessed half of this from across the street while spraying somebody's bushes for termites, Vanessa followed the inspector around the yard demanding answers while wearing rain boots that still somehow looked expensive. At one point she apparently said, "Can't the county force him to repair it?" And Ray, God bless that man, replied, "Ma'am, you terminated the contractor maintaining infrastructure tied to a legal easement he still controls. The county cannot compel private maintenance obligations without transfer agreements." Translation? You fired the wrong guy. The story should have ended there honestly. Most people would have settled quietly and moved on. But pride does funny things once wealthy people realize they're not in control anymore. 3 days later, I got an email from Vanessa. Short, cold, clearly written after several glasses of wine. She accused me of intentionally withholding critical property information and implied I'd manipulated the situation to create dependency. Reading it actually made me angry for the first time because dependency wasn't the point. Reliability was. There's a difference. I started typing a response probably 6 different times before deleting it. Emily finally walked over, took the laptop from my hands, and said, "You don't need to win the argument. Reality already did." Smart woman. So I waited. Next morning, another email came through. Completely different tone. No accusations. No superiority. Just one sentence. "We may have made a serious mistake." I stared at that message for a while because buried underneath all the money and ego and neighborhood politics, there it was. The one thing Vanessa Whitaker almost never allowed herself to be. Honest. I replied with exactly 1 paragraph. I explained that I would consider resuming maintenance operations under a new service agreement reflecting current market rates, liability restructuring, and full authority over drainage management decisions moving forward. In plain English, the price just went way up. Grant signed within 4 days. Vanessa never spoke much during the new contract meeting. She mostly sat at the patio table staring out toward the soaked lower yard while I reviewed the maintenance revisions. But right before I left, she finally looked at me and said something I genuinely didn't expect. I thought landscaping was cosmetic. I clipped my pen into my shirt pocket and told her, Most people do. Then I walked back to my truck while the new drainage crew I hired started unloading equipment near the retaining wall. Real crew this time. Guys who understood water tables, slope pressure, subsurface runoff, not just decorative mulch colors. The repairs took almost 3 weeks. We rebuilt the west-grade pitch, cleared sediment backup through the overflow junction, reinforced 2 collapsed trench sections, and rerouted part of the runoff toward the creek basin again. Cost the Whitakers a small fortune too. A whole lot more than keeping me employed would've. And here's the part that still makes people argue whenever this story gets brought up around town. Some neighbors thought I was justified. They said the Whitakers got exactly what they deserved for treating skilled labor like disposable background noise. Others thought I should have warned them more directly, said I had a moral responsibility because I knew what could happen. Maybe they're right. Honestly, I still go back and forth on that sometimes. Because the truth is, I never wanted revenge. I just wanted respect. Wanted somebody to understand that invisible work is still work, maybe the most important kind there is. These days, whenever I drive through Bellmeadow Ridge after a storm, I notice something funny. People wave a little differently now. Contractors especially. Like the whole neighborhood suddenly realized the guy covered in mud might actually know more about their homes than the people decorating them. And Vanessa? Well, she never talked about aesthetics again. So let me ask you something. If you were in my position, would you have handled it differently? Or do people sometimes need to learn the hard way what something is truly worth before they stop taking it for granted? Let me know in the comments, because I've seen this split rooms straight down the middle.